We're on a race right now to double our business before the end of the year. And we can do that. We can absolutely do that. Now, to start, I just want to ask you the very benign question. How much money do you make right now? Now, jot this down somewhere because we're going to compare it to a couple of things. So write this down right now. How much do you make right now? And if that's $0, put $0. If that's $100,000 a month, put $100,000 a month. There's no judgment, just where are we at right now? Let's take inventory of where we're at right now on a monthly basis, on a month-to-month basis. So what's your business selling? What are you taking home? However you want to evaluate this. Okay, and now question number 2, how much do you want to make? How much do you want to be making? Now, what I would like to hear from you is what's the difference between question number 1 and question number 2. So now I'd like to hear from you, and you can jot this down if you want to. So what do you perceive right now is preventing you from having that gap or from closing that gap? What do you perceive is the challenge? Or said the way that I like to see this is, if there was a magic wand that showed up that allowed you to close this gap next week, what does the magic wand do? How does the magic wand help you close this gap? Tiffany says capital. Bullshit. Sorry, Tiffany. We beat this to death this week in the capitalism incubator. I'm going to beat it to death some more. But I'm just gonna slay this demon right now, Tiffany. No entrepreneur lacks capital. Capital's everywhere. We're swimming in capital. What entrepreneurs lack is the vision that is exciting to capital. That's what entrepreneurs lack. So some of you aren't sure. So sit with this. Like, play with this. Now, another way to ask this question is, what would absolutely close that gap? Like, if you didn't need to know how, and if you didn't need to do it, what would just make that happen? Like Joe Rogan talks about your product. Would that do it? Some affiliate that you've never met picks it up. Some major blog. MSNBC does a feature on it. You start showing up on CNN. Tim Ferriss talks about you. The president tweets about you. You can play with this. Like, what other things would close this gap real fast? Now, I'm going to ask you one more question to play with on this. Now, look at the how much you want to make line. And just look at that number, how much you want to make. And then we're going to do a mathematical formula on this, how much money we want to make. The mathematical formula is how much money do you want to make times 10. And write that number down. Okay, now a follow-up question to this. What came up for you when you wrote that number? Did you judge the number? Did you have doubts about the number? Did you have excitement about the number? It's so interesting. I love this game. I love this process because it's just a number. Like, the assignment was take the number and times it by 10. And what's interesting is all of these judgments tend to come up. About 80% of people. Like, even so, this is a great comment from Ken. Ken says it just seems too large. What? He means just too large. It seems too big. It seems too high. Seems like too much. Because otherwise, like, if you believed it was normal, it would have been the first number. It would have been the how much money you want to make line. But when we times that by 10, there's for a lot of people, there's this hesitation. But the assignment is, it's just a number. It was just an assignment. But what this exposes is the story that you have about growth. It highlights the story in your head about the amount of money that you want to make. it highlights the story you've got in your brain about how you're going to get there, or how hard it's going to be, or what's reasonable or expected. But when you realize that it's just a story, then you can make these numbers whatever you'd like them to be. So, Greg, this is an interesting comment you made about this highlights the story about how much we think we are worth. Another way for us to think about this is it highlights the fact that we connect money with worth. Like, what if you were completely detached from the number and it was just a number, and your worth or your ability was just constant or infinite, right? Like, so regardless of what the number does, if you were just here and you were able to release the connection between who you are and what you're worth as if they weren't related at all. Now it's just a number. Now it's just money. Now it's just neutral. So Lil has a great question to this. How did you open yourself up to the bigger number? So here's your first assignment for this week. That number, some of you put, the most common answer was $1 million a month. In that number times 10. Your job this week is to answer the question, is there anyone that you can find evidence of that makes or has made $1 million a month, or whatever that number is? You don't have to be like these people. You don't have to know these people. You don't have to have a connection to these people. Just, can you think of people who make the amount of money that you want to make times 10? The answer is always yes, because no one here is Jeff Bezos. The answer is obviously yes, because no one here is Warren Buffett. So there's two examples. And so you can just beat that to death. Now, the evidence part of this process is not just people. It's also things like processes. It's also opportunities. It's also companies. Are there companies like yours who have that kind of revenue? Can you think of companies or businesses in or out of your industry that have that type of revenue? The money you want to make times 10. So here's, the more you play with this, like we could spend this whole call talking about this, and it would be really fun. But we've done this for about 4.5 minutes now of just talking about a little bit of evidence for it. As you talk about people who make $1 million, and you could keep going, you could go $10 million a month. So if the more evidence you can find for that amount of money you want to make times 10, and the more you play with this, the more normal it becomes. So the next question then is, when you sit in that for a little bit, how does it feel when you go back to that first number of how much money you want to make? So if you look at how much money you want to make and what you put down there, how does that feel now when you look at that number? Or what's the feeling of small? Meg says easy. Some people might use the word disappointing. It's almost like a disappointment in yourself. It's like, shit, I've been doing this for 5 minutes and I already realize how small I've been thinking. Be just as mindful not to judge that number as you were when you judged the first number. The number times 10. So check this out. This is just an interesting observation I'm making based on your comments. When you times the number by 10, you had self-judgments come up. I can't do this. It's too hard. And when you now are comparing, you're like, you lived in that number and you normalize that number for 5 minutes. And you look at your first number of what you wanted to make. Some of you are saying the exact same thing in reverse. I'm not thinking big enough. I'm insecure about it. And if you pay attention to this, It's the same story. Times it by 10. Oh, that feels hard. That feels hard for me. I'm not sure how I would do that. I can't think that big. Then you compare it back to your original number. Oh, that's small. I don't think big enough. I don't work hard enough. It's still self-defeat. Just want you to play with that for a second. That perhaps the story you've got about what's normal or hard or big is just a bullshit story in your head. Maybe. Okay, so now we've been playing with this. Now that we've been playing this for a few minutes, let me go into a couple of strategic things. Let me pull out okay, what are we going to do about this? Now, there are 3 ways to increase revenue in a business. You can get more customers, sell more stuff. That's a volume play. Get more front-end customers. Number 2 is to sell more stuff to your existing people, sell new stuff to your existing people, or put differently, increase the frequency. You get people to reorder faster. You can sell them more products, additional things, launch new offers. Or number 3, you can raise your price. That's all. Those are really the 3 primary ways that you grow your business. Now, what I'm going to invite you to consider is that you can do all 3 of these with one move. You can do all 3 of these with one thing, and that is releasing something premium in the marketplace. If you release something premium, meaning very high margin, higher priced than most people are willing to go, you can do all 3. Now, you don't need to know what that is yet. You don't need to know what that is at all. But I want to point out that these 3 things are not independent of one another. They are correlated with one another. So you can sometimes get new customers, increase your volume by raising your price. Reason I bring this up is I want you to look at your current business right now. And if you're going to double your business before the end of this year, which one of these stands out to you? And if none of them stand out as obvious for you right now, can you combine them into one? Can the solution be, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a premium offering to my existing buyers, to the existing marketplace. And in doing so, do all 3 of these and now have a new, very high margin profit center in my business that ends up being the thing that drives this. And by the way, the answer is always yes. There's always you can, as long as you want to. All right, now let's move on. Because the only way that you can do any of these 3 is by having people pay attention to you. It's the term that I call audience. Now, there is a training from the 1% where I go very deep into building audiences. We spent a whole month talking about it. I'm going to recap it in 3 bullet points. I would highly recommend. I think it was probably our best training of the year so far. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But here's the summary in 3 bullet points. If you could only do one thing, create a lead magnet and drive all of your ads and exposure to that lead magnet. The sale comes in the follow-up emails. So all this to say, if you don't know where to build an audience, build an email list. If you're not building an email list, you're kind of wasting your time. Email is the highest converting audience mechanism, by far, without question. Everything else exists to build the email list. All of your content exists to engage the existing audience. And the purpose of the first purchase is to pay for the acquisition costs. That's audience building in 3 points. Put all your attention on email. Content exists to engage the existing audience. And the first purchase is there to pay for the acquisition cost. All of the profit comes in the follow-up. Now, when you have a buyer or you have an audience, now launching a high-end offer becomes possible. Now increasing the frequency of your purchases becomes more possible. Now you have your own control of raising your prices, building the audience, or running new offers, or increasing the frequency. Let's talk about the how piece of this. How do you kick this off? Because there are some conversations that I saw in the group this week that were a little bit like how do I start building that audience? How do I start building that list? And I would encourage you not to overthink this. So I would encourage you to just simply answer a few simple questions. If you're looking to build the audience, what is the simplest thing that you can give them that would entice them to join your community? By community, I mean give you their email address. So if you sell physical products, a lot of times that is a coupon, a discount, a bonus. If you do a good job in the ad showing the product and then you offer a discount in the email address in the lead magnet, it's kind of an obvious win. Most people will say, like, get my 30-day course, and at the end you can buy my pan. There's just no need. So the other way that you can kind of crack this nut is for you to look at what's different about yours, or what is the perfect primer for the ideal person to buy your product, and front end that as a lead acquisition. Front end with that, and then sell in the follow-up. All the magic happens in the follow-up. And if you look at the training we did about audience building, kind of the formula is ad or content to lead magnet to sales page, but that sales page just exists to pay for the acquisition costs. So as you are front-ending something to build that audience, there's essentially 3 ways to dump people into the top end of that. There's advertising, there's sponsorships and referrals, and there's organic content. So ads, we're going to talk all about next week. We're going to talk about viral ads and video ads with Kevin Anson, one of our own, pretty much the best in the business at building video ads that convert. And we'll break this topic down even more. Organic content, you all know, and most people resist, and it's fine. You don't have to do it. I think the purpose of organic content is to engage the audience that already exists. And then the third is referrals and sponsorships. This is when you go sponsor the influencer to talk about the lead capture, not the product, the lead capture. Because it's very hard to get somebody to convert on first awareness. But it's very easy for them to join the ecosystem on first awareness. So the way that we're going to focus on doubling our business, getting closer to that number that we want, is putting our attention on lead acquisition and answering that question, which of those 3 or all 3 of those areas of business growth are we going to focus on? New product, increasing frequency, or price? Now, one thing to consider is in the same way we did that exercise of how much money do we want to make times 10, one of the things that I like to play with sometimes is, what's your highest price product? Times that by 10. What solution in the marketplace could you release that would be worth that? So if your highest price product is $100, what could you release that would be $1,000 and worth it? And that's usually a done-for-you solution, a training, a community. And once again, are other people doing that? Is there evidence for that? Could you have people pay up front for something? But of course, none of this matters. None of this matters if you cannot foresee, if you can't envision yourself doing this, if you can't envision that it is possible for you, which is why we spend so much time on that deep work at the beginning of this.